Hello, my dears. This is Eleanor Rose, and today we're going to be talking about contracts. This is important to know about because at almost every photo shoot, the photographer is going to have the model sign a model release. There's a lot of misconceptions around this, and I'm not a lawyer, so please, if you have any questions or really want to understand this situation better, do your own research and talk to a lawyer if you feel that it's necessary. But from my experience in my 5 years as a model, this is what I have learned. Firstly, the model release is the photographer's way of protecting themselves. It does not typically protect the model. So, what that means is as a model, you are not responsible for bringing or providing a model release. The photographer will provide it if they feel that it's necessary. What you are responsible for is always reading the model release and making sure that you know what you're signing. Do not feel like you have to skim it or not skip reading it entirely just because you feel rushed or hurried. If the photographer is trying to rush you or hurry you, that's not necessarily a red flag. Sometimes they're just impatient and don't realize what a big deal it can be to us models. But please don't let that affect you reading the contract, because it's important that you know what you're signing. And sometimes there are clauses in there that we can be uncomfortable with. Now, for the most part, if you've already agreed to a shoot, have shown up, and done the shoot, you can be stuck into signing a release. But if somebody's release truly makes you uncomfortable and they will not allow you to amend it, I really recommend just walking away, even if that means giving up the money. Because if you sign that release, that means that they can use those images and that whatever clauses you were uncomfortable with are legal. You're stuck with them. So, I want to cover two basic things in this video. I'm going to be talking briefly to models about what I advise you look for, and then I want to talk to photographers for a minute and tell you how to make your releases more comfortable for models, because I know that a lot of you are really looking for that information. Okay, so models. Here's the deal. One of the biggest things I see in releases that can be a problem for us is if we have a modeling pseudonym, we don't want our legal name to be able to be used in conjunction with the images. But per the nature of releases, we often have to provide both our ID and our legal name. So you want to make sure that there is a clause in the contract that states that the photographer cannot use your legal name in conjunction with the images. If there's not, I often write that on there, that images can only be used with my modeling pseudonym, and have both me and the photographer sign and date. You initial and date next to that written on amendment. Now, different lawyers disagree on whether or not that actually constitutes a legal change to the contract. But in my opinion, it both forms to make the photographer, or serves to make the photographer aware that that is something you require. It serves to remind them every time they look at the contract. It opens a dialogue for you to mention that you really need them to make sure that they only use your legal name or your modeling pseudonym in conjunction with the images and never your legal name. And, very important, that includes in the file names and EXIF data, because if they include that in the file names and EXIF data, people can access that and find out our real names that way. And it really establishes, even if it might not be technically legal, if it does turn into a legal battle, which it shouldn't because you've established your stance on the topic, if both parties have initialed and dated it, it really indicates that this was at least a verbal contract that you came to. Again, I'm not a lawyer, check with your lawyers, but it's an extra layer of protection for you. Now, the other thing that I often see that I want to make sure that people are aware of is you want the contract to be held to either the laws of where you live, or if you're traveling, the laws of where you're shooting or where the photographer lives. I bring this up because many of the new contracts that are just blanket photography forms that are accessible via online modeling release apps or on device, a lot of photographers now have me sign a contract on their phones. For some reason, they have a very strange little clause that states that the contract is held to the location in the following list that is closest to the home address of the model. And then it lists a bunch of countries and cities. The city in the US is New York, and unfortunately that's actually further away from my home address than the location in Canada that's listed. So per that contract, I would actually be held to Canadian laws if this ever went to court. Do I expect it to go to court? Of course not. I've never had that happen with any of my shoots, and I never expect to. But having worked at a law firm myself before I quit that to go into modeling, I want to make sure that the contracts I am signing are contracts that I am comfortable having had signed if it does go to court for whatever reason. So I always make sure to write in a clause in the notes section, if it's on that app, that says that it will be held to the laws in California, which is my home address and where I do most of my shoots, and both initial and date it myself and have the photographer initial and date it. Again, this might not completely cement it legally, but it makes sure that the photographer is aware of that, and it indicates a verbal contract. So it's important that you cover yourself that way. Really just make sure, always read the contracts, be aware of what they say. One other issue you'll want to be aware of is use. Most contracts allow photographers to use the images to sell or to distribute for promotional purposes, but some do allow them to use them for pay-per-view sites. They need an extra clause most of the time to actually have us agree to let them use the images for pay-per-view sites. Now, if you set up the shoot with the understanding that that's what the image use is going to be, great. The contract should include that. But a lot of photographers will, even on non-nude or non-erotic shoots, sell to pay-per-view sites. I say a lot, it's not a huge number of photographers, but it is a significant number of photographers, unfortunately. So you really want to make sure if you see that in the contract and that's not something that you're okay with, that's not something that you do, or you weren't paid for that, because that can change the rates for a particular shoot, you want to make sure to cross that out and have both parties initial and date it. So, on the modeling front, those are the 3 things I really want you to be aware of. Other than that, read the contracts, make sure you understand them, make sure you have a conversation about anything that you're not sure about with the photographer, and get a feel for what is common and expected in a model release. Go online, do your research, get a feel for what's typical, and if something isn't typical, make sure that you take a look and make sure you understand it before you sign. Now, photographers. A lot of you want to know what makes a good modeling release. You know those things I just talked about? Those are things you want to be aware of. Please, please make sure that you have something in there that tells the model that you cannot use their legal name in conjunction with the images unless they're comfortable with it, without their express permission. Make sure that in the section for us to fill out, you have a space for both our modeling name and our legal name. Please, please don't call it real name. It's legal name. That's a personal thing, but many of us are going to agree with that. So just have a space for modeling name and legal name. Now, the other thing that I really want to address that didn't come up in what I spoke with the models about, I've seen a lot of you have a clause in the model release forms that is meant to protect you. It goes something like this. I, the model, certify that the shoot went fine and at no time did I feel uncomfortable or under duress or fill in the blanks. Something that protects you from a model coming back and saying that you behaved inappropriately. Now, here's the deal. That sounds great on paper, but unfortunately what I've seen too often is, one, some of you want us to sign the releases at the beginning of the shoot, and in no way will I ever sign a release at the beginning of the shoot that says that you performed or you behaved appropriately throughout the shoot if the shoot hasn't happened yet. So if you insist on using that, don't ask anybody to sign it until the shoot is over. Additionally, I'd really rather see you not include that at all, and that is not because we want to come back and try and sue you or whatever. To be honest, ask any model, the rates of photographers actually seeing legal repercussions for behaving inappropriately, it's very low. We don't have much to stand on, and really, we're not going to accuse you if you didn't do anything, because that would put us at more risk. That would increase people not believing us when we speak up about things that have happened, and it makes us look unprofessional. It really does not happen as much as you hear horror stories about. But what I'm more worried about is if a model has completed a shoot with somebody who makes her feel incredibly uncomfortable. Typically, we just want to get our money, sign the release, do whatever we need to get the photographer to let us go so that we can get out of there. And often if a release includes a clause like that, and a shoot has been uncomfortable, or we felt violated, or whatever fill in the blanks happened, there will be a feeling of, if I don't sign this and say that everything went fine even though it didn't, I will not be safe, I will be hurt, I won't be able to get out of here. So, if you really do care about model well-being, I ask you to not include that in your releases, because I do very, very much fear that if that becomes standard, photographers who do prey on models, especially newer models, which is the whole reason that I'm making these videos in the first place, to make it so that models understand how things work and don't fall victim to the photographers who prey on newer models. They will use that to their advantage. They will make a model sign that at the beginning of the shoot, or use that emotional manipulation to convince a model that they have to sign it at the end of the shoot, or they won't get out safely, or they won't get their money, which they may be depending on. Now, whether that model will actually follow up and make a report or whatever, that remains to be seen. A lot of us don't actually report things legally because nude models aren't really listened to by law enforcement unless we have proof. But I don't want models to know the remainder of their career that they signed that, for that photographer to use to show to other models, look, see, they signed it, I'm safe, for whatever to happen. That adds insult to injury on top of an already traumatic experience. I'm really, really worried by these clauses. So if you want your model releases to be something that models are comfortable with, I ask you to consider this and not put that on there. If you really want to protect yourself, ask models after the shoot via email if they'd be willing to provide a testimonial. If you behaved appropriately, most of us will gladly give it. Sometimes I have refused a testimonial simply because either there was bad chemistry, but nothing that I'd actually try to blacklist somebody for, or just, I don't have time to do testimonials, so I'll politely turn somebody down and say, you know what, I had a great time, I can't give you the testimonial that you deserve right now, but remind me again in a couple of weeks and I'll get back to you. Something like that. You won't always get testimonials and you can't expect everyone to give them to you, but you can ask for them as a way to get those references and get new models to be comfortable with working with you, instead of using something in your model release that I know is well-intentioned and I know it's meant to protect you, but what it really does more is put models in danger. Models, if you see a release like that, honestly, I don't know what to tell you at this point. Personally, I have signed those and continue to do so, but if I had a bad shoot and did work with a photographer who I could not in good conscience sign that, personally, I would rather risk losing my money than sign it, but if I felt unsafe, I probably would. I honestly don't know what to tell you. It's a tricky subject, and if you're in that situation, please, please message me. Please message me. I will help you however I can. Again, I don't even know what I'd do myself if I was put in that situation. I'm at a point now where I don't need the money from any one shoot badly enough to sign that if it was contingent on payment. But I know how it was when I started my career, and I know that many of you live shoot to shoot, and if you have to sign it to get your money and you need someone to talk to later, I will not judge you. I will help you. If you need to talk, I am here. For the most part, model releases are a simple issue. They protect the photographer by saying they can use the images in whatever ways the release defines. And you're fine to sign them as long as you read them and understand them. Sometimes it gets tricky, sometimes you'll have to change a few terms, and occasionally you might face a release that asks you to testify that the shoot went well. Hopefully you can use the information I give you on checking references to make sure that you never face a situation where you're asked to sign that and did have a bad experience. If that does happen, I'm here for you. And hopefully the rest of this information on releases helps you and makes you more confident moving into professional modeling and signing those releases. Because what I really want to see is you not to be afraid of releases, but to know what's common, what's a standard release, what isn't standard, and what you can ask for if a release doesn't cover it. Especially if you model nude or glamour or use a pseudonym and don't want your legal name attached for any reason, you can add that addendum and have the photographer initial and date it and protect yourself that way. And often the value in that is just opening that dialogue with a photographer who maybe hasn't added that to release or hasn't thought of it already, and making sure that they know that to protect you and to make you comfortable, that's what you need. Now, you can open a dialogue with a photographer about what their release includes before the shoot. For many of us who do things full-time, we don't often do that because reading the release before the shoots is a huge time investment, and if we're planning a big tour, we can't always do that. But I have heard of many models doing that, including professional full-time models. And if that makes you feel more comfortable, I encourage you to do it so that you can talk about any clause included in the contract before the shoot. Honestly, I think that would be the ideal, and I would like to see the industry shift in that direction. We'll see how things go. And please let me know your thoughts on this. I'm really interested to hear from both models and photographers on this one, because this is a huge and weighty subject, and it does, as you've seen in this video, cover a lot of different topics, different discussion points. I could probably create videos on many of these different discussion points that I've touched on in this one. And I really want to know what you think. Photographers, how do you feel about me asking you to take that clause out? I know that that's that could be a sore point, and I'll probably hit a lot of nerves with that. And I encourage a dialogue. I just ask that you be respectful and polite. Models, how do you feel about signing a release that doesn't protect your legal name? How do you feel about signing a release that asks you in the moment while you're still at the shoot to testify that the shoot went well and the photographer behaved appropriately the entire time? Tell me what you think of what I've covered. This is one I'd like to see a dialogue started in the industry around. I really think we need to talk about what a standardized release should entail and how to protect the model and photographer alike. Because both parties are important and we need to protect both sides. But I'd really like to find a way to do that better than something that I really think will actively endanger models if it becomes standard. So leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Feel free to message me. And definitely, if you need something to be a private conversation, just tell me, reach out to me. I am here for you if you need help, okay? That's it for this time. I will see you next video. Bye-bye.